Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Rebecca Prejean. She is the CEO and founder of EB Graphics and Consulting, specializes in instructional design, multimedia production, and accessibility-focused learning experiences. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the world will benefit from what we are discussing right now. We'll be talking about embracing neurodiversity for business and innovation. So I want to understand, but before we come to that, Rebecca, let's understand a bit about your journey so that people know who they are listening to directly from you.
Yes. So as you said, I'm Rebecca Prejean. I am the CEO and founder of EB Graphics and Consulting. So as you mentioned, we do all things accessibility for neurodivergent individuals. For me and my journey, I have actually been in learning and development for right around 12 years or so. Before that, I was in graphic design and multimedia web design. I actually started this specific journey with accessibility when I became a mother about 7, almost 8 years ago now. He'll be 8 in July. My son is actually neurodivergent. He has autism. And before him, I really didn't have a lens through which to understand that people thought differently. I just didn't. My family had never encountered that. And so by having him, by seeing some of his different trials, some of his different, barriers, obstacles, I began to see a lot of parallels between how he was living and the things he was going through and what people were dealing with in learning and development within the corporate world. So we've obviously helped him a lot in terms of getting him support, but it's been a journey and it hasn't always been easy. And so I really wanted to start to support people where I work, helping people go through learning and development in a way that actually speaks to them and in a way that helps them become productive and perform greater and actually reach greater achievements. And at the end of the day, that really does help businesses as well. Businesses don't hire people just to sit and do nothing and struggle. That's not what they want. They want their people to perform at their peak. And to do that, you have to have an understanding that people are different in terms of how they think, in terms of how they absorb information. And you have to kind of speak to that. And there's a very delicate balance. But for me, that journey has been about 8 years running in terms of understanding just how important that is.
So right, Rebecca. So I just did a Google search before this. Every time I forget it, but the meaning and all, because every time it comes out differently. But again, I did to just make sure that I'm updated on this. It says, it is about people whose brain works a bit differently. Like some people, they are right brain, left brain. You are. Some people are left hand. They are much more prominent on the right hand prominent. It's like that. So brains can be different. Why is it that people don't understand the neurodivergent part of people who are born that way, as they understand someone who is of a, who's on working with left hand or a right hand? That is very common. Why is this neurodivergence thing very difficult for people to grasp or understand and get things done accordingly?
I think there's several reasons that I think that can happen from just a normal kind of stereotypical standpoint. I think it's difficult because when you see somebody who's neurodivergent, they don't look different a lot of the time. If you were to see my almost 8-year-old child, he looks just like every other 8-year-old. He just has specific things that are different about him. And I think it's hard sometimes for people to just look at someone who they identify with, like, you look like me, you function like me, you talk like me. There's no clear disability happening, but yet there's something going on inside. And so I think that is one particular barrier. I also think that some people are scared of what's different. And in the world of business in particular, what I hear from some clients is they're scared to make a mistake. That's sometimes why they don't go through and push through to just saying, well, we're at least going to start trying. We're going to do small things at least to meet some of our people where they are. I think they're very scared. They're scared in the era of social media that they will be plastered all over places if they get it wrong. And I don't think that that is inherently wrong for them to feel that way. I think it's okay to be scared. I think it's okay to have some fear, but I do think that those things play a part in everything that we see, especially when we talk about the workplace. If you are operating from a place of fear, you're not going to be inclined to then, step out of your comfort zone. So I do think that people struggle with looking at someone that doesn't have a clear disability or handicap and thinking, well, they think differently. And I think for businesses, it's about, well, we don't want to make a mistake and we don't want to step into a landfill or landmine, essentially, when we don't have to, in their brains.
Right, right, Rebecca. So, in terms of accessibility, what is accessibility here? Means, are they blocking it, or they need to do something? Help us understand this from a very common person's perspective.
From a common person's perspective, I want you to think of accessibility as just another way of support. So we all like YouTube. We all like to go on YouTube and watch these videos that teach us how to do things. Essentially, accessibility is almost that. It is the support lever that people can pull, people can access to be able to learn and grasp concepts. Like some people watching a YouTube video, I actually watched a YouTube video this weekend on how to cut my son's hair. That's a whole different adventure. But some people can't absorb that information in that way. Maybe it's too much of the sensory information. Maybe it's just too much of the visual. Even videos that we make, sometimes we all like animations. That's a big thing. But for some people, that's a bit too much. It's too colorful. It's too bright. It moves too much. And so accessibility says, okay, we understand that you might need something different. So we're going to give you something different. In the e-learnings and things that I create that are more interactive, I have buttons, I have levers, I have things that people can select to somewhat customize, their experience. I also do things in different ways. So even though something might be a video, there's a PDF. So somebody can just read it and absorb it and reread it and sit with it. So from the common man's perspective, I want you to think of it as just support, because that's really all this is. That's really all accessibility truly is supporting people and meeting them where they're at any given time.
Right, right. So basically, provide content or anything that is required in a simple manner that is very easy for people, neurodivergent people especially, or those who need that in that particular manner. It's fair. There's nothing big demand here. It's like a bit more of a customized offering, like everyone do. The people do it for their customers, for either in terms of product or services. What's the harm in providing this? But is it too difficult for them to do? Why don't they do it?
I don't think it's difficult. I think that it is nuanced, because when you think about neurodiversity, everybody can be different, right? And so you might need different things for somebody who has ADHD versus somebody who has autism versus somebody who has dyslexia. And so some people get stuck in well, how do I account for all of these things, which I think is a valid concern. Definitely not dismissing it, but sometimes it's just starting. So sometimes it's not, I need this huge picture of every single accessibility feature that I can think of. It's, let's just start simple. Let's start with closed captioning. That is something that most people, if you want to use AI, you can use that to generate some closed captions, put it in a video, and you're done. It's not an expensive thing. And quite frankly, a lot of when we talk about accessibility, we also sometimes talk about accommodations. A lot of accommodations don't cost anything. About 59% of accommodations cost nothing. And then the others are around, I think, $500 most of the time. Some are a little bit more expensive, but it's really just getting started. And I think people just get stuck in this box of it's such a big thing, and it really is important, and it can be impactful. So I need this entire strategy for the next 6 months to a year, or it's not worth doing. And it shouldn't be that way. It's what can we do now? Let's see how it goes. Let's get feedback, and then let's incrementally increase. You don't have to have all of the things right this second. So I don't think it's that they don't want to. I think some people don't know how to, which is where people like me come in, like, hey, let me help you. Let me hold your hand. And sometimes people just don't have the bandwidth. And I hate to say that, but businesses right now, a lot of them don't have the bandwidth to have people, dedicate time to this. But again, that's where somebody like myself comes in. Like, hey, I know your people are strapped. I know your L&D team is really feeling a lot of pressure because of all the things. So let's get some outside support. So sometimes it's just they don't know how. Sometimes they don't have the resources, or they just don't even know where to start sometimes. But you got to start to be able to make it happen.
Right, absolutely. And that is where you come into the picture, Rebecca. How do you talk to them? What do you talk to them? Because if they are either not prepared for it or reluctant for it, how do you then convince them to make things more accessible for neurodivergent especially?
I start with what's important to them. And this is not going to sound great, but from a business perspective, what matters is money, the bottom line. And I mean, that's the truth of business in general. We love businesses that love their people, but businesses are in the business of making money. And so for me, I do talk about the return on investment. I talk about the fact that, businesses that actually focus on neurodiversity, focus on neurodivergency, you can have like a 30% revenue increase. Like there's all these benefits to productivity. There's these benefits to innovation. There are all of these things that you're missing. You want to be the top leader in your space. You want to be the creator. You want to be first and foremost. You have to invest in your people. And you have an untapped group of folks already in your talent pool, already working for you, who can bring you to another level. But you have to be able to meet them where they are, and you have to be able to give them the support that they need, or you won't be able to reach that. You'll be trying to hire from outside, and that costs money. That costs money to onboard people. That costs money to do all these things. And then you're also losing money on the back end because you can't retain your neurodivergent employees. Partially because they don't identify, which is completely their right, and they shouldn't have to, but you're not giving them the support. So they struggle, they get frustrated, and they try to move on to other people that will do that for them and give those amazing gifts to your competitors. So why wouldn't you want to keep that in-house and empower them to bring you guys to the next level? And when you talk about it in those terms and you break it down in terms that, people who are higher ups can understand and can latch on to, they're usually very open at that point to at least trying small things. Like I said, we don't throw them in the deep end right away. We give them small incremental things so that they can start to see the connections. So I do think that part of getting people to do this in business is really making that connection between you have these organizational goals. You want to meet them, you're struggling to meet them, but your answer is really in your people that you already have that are untapped.
Right. What are the questions that these companies generally come with? Either to say yes or no. I'm sure no must be much more predominant, but I want to understand what is it that they come up with, either in terms of challenges they have, or either whatever excuse if they want to make.
I love it. It's the excuses they want to make. In terms of challenges that they generally come to me with first, they usually say things like, hey, we know that neurodiversity is a big thing. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big thing. We know that we have neurodivergent people working for us. Our leaders don't know how to talk to them. Our leaders are scared. Our leaders are unprepared. Our employees, they just seem to be disengaged at a certain level. And we don't know how to get everybody together on the same page. And it's hurting us. Those tend to be some of the first questions that come up. And then the second questions are things like, hey, we've had people who have disclosed that they're neurodivergent, that they have maybe a disability. and we don't have anything for them, and we don't have anybody to create them, like, or we're not familiar with compliance standards, we're not familiar with, kind of these different things, how can you help us? Or in some situations, we just got talked to about compliance and not being in compliance. Can you help us? So it's a wide array of things that people come to me with. Now, when we're in the actual process of deciding whether or not to work together, cost comes up. Cost is always going to be first and foremost, because when people think about accessible design, they think, well, now do I need to buy all of these fancy software programs? Do I need to buy all of these things? And you're like, no, you don't. You can essentially normally use exactly what you have. Do I need to buy an LMS? Not right away. We might consider it later, but you don't have to do it right now. There are things that you can do even within your existing structure to help your neurodivergent people. It's not always about technology. It is truly about having a very clear thought process and a very clear strategy. So people oftentimes costs, if I'm being honest with you, is what comes up. That, and also evaluating like results, which again, I think is fair. Because if you are a business owner, you want to see kind of how things are going. And so we talk about how that looks at the end of it. Like, well, do you do employee surveys? Do your surveys include anything about accessibility? Do they ask anybody about any of these things, or ask anonymously, would they like to see these things? And most of the time it's a no. They don't have anything like that. They don't talk about any kind of accessibility, any kind of neurodiversity whatsoever. And so we start to implement the foundation and the pillars for people to build on. Because at the end of the day, you may outgrow our business relationship, and that's okay. But it's about forming the foundation for people to do what they need to do.
Right, right. So, how does the trend look like? Is it more support coming in? Is it less support coming in? How does it look like, Rebecca?
The trend definitely looks like more support coming in.
That's good.
Usually it looks a lot like, first times we'll have some workshops, we'll have some webinars, and we'll also start to send out information. So, organizations love email. They love to send all kinds of things on email. How about you start sending some of this stuff on email?
Right.
About just basic tips, basic strategies on how to interact with people in general. And so what some people get concerned about is, well, are people going to have to disclose? One part of our mission at my company is we don't believe anybody should ever have to disclose to get support. And so sometimes just giving people best tips, best practices, best strategies on how to interact with one another will be enough to kind of start that road. But when we really start, we start to just implement itty bitty things about neurodiversity. Every so often an email, mention it in your newsletter. Let's start putting it on your surveys. And then let's talk about some webinars. Let's talk about some workshops for your leadership people. Let's talk about some leadership development that goes beyond just, this is how you do a performance review. This is how you do a performance review, and make sure that you're doing it in an inclusive way so that the people on your team don't feel like they have no key to success. I've worked for many, many people, and I can tell you performance reviews are high pressure. They are high stress. I'll be honest, I used to think I was getting fired every time I was in one. I wasn't even a bad employee. It was just so filled with pressure. And so we talk to leaders about how to take that process, make it less stress filled, and actually give people good, clear feedback, and how to communicate goals in a way that everybody can absorb them. Even if that means, here, this is the sheet that you want to give them, this is a printout, give them some time to analyze it. And then when you actually have that performance review, you guys can talk about it in a real way. So it depends on the company, but there's a lot of different levers that we pull, a lot of extra support that tends to come in to try to make sure everybody has what they need.
Right, right. The only good thing I can remember is, that people like you are working, and that the trend is looking much, much positive. That is something to And I'm sure a lot of people would like to know more about these things, would like to connect with you and try to offer their help or take your help, to put things into their companies. With this hope, I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect. So what's the best way for them to connect with you, Rebecca?
Couple of ways people can connect with me. They can find me on LinkedIn, search my name, Rebecca Prejean. I'll pop right up. I'm the only one. You can also search for my business, EB Graphics and Consulting, through my website, www.ebgc.net. Or you can even get me through email. I'm really accessible. I'm really available for whatever you need. But rebecca.prejean@ebgc.net is my email address. I'm always happy to have conversations with people and just start the train, because you have to start somewhere to get to the end.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.